There is a category of operational problem that naval doctrine addresses in its training syllabus under the heading of degraded operations. The set of procedures, workarounds, and manual overrides that a ship's crew employs when the combat systems that are supposed to function are not functioning at full capacity. Degraded operations training is conducted regularly, is taken seriously by commanding officers who understand that combat rarely delivers the ideal conditions for which systems are designed, and produces crews who have rehearsed, on paper and in simulation, the specific adaptations required to maintain defensive capability when the architecture supporting that capability has been partially compromised. What the training cannot fully replicate is the weight of fighting degraded after a real engagement has produced the degradation. Not a simulated casualty introduced by an exercise director, an actual system failure, an actual fragment impact, an actual section of combat infrastructure that is no longer performing its designed function because something real has damaged it. And the crew that is now being asked to fight with what remains is the same crew that just survived the event that created the damage. The destroyer had been in the lower Persian Gulf when the first engagement occurred, a drone swarm attack that the watch team had successfully defended against, with the exception of a single terminal contact that the Aft CIWS mount had eliminated at 41 meters from the hull. The elimination at that range had been close enough that the disintegrating airframe's debris had reached the ship. The primary structural damage was to the aft deck plating, 2 penetrating fragment impacts that had entered the deck housing for the aft VLS cells and had shorted the firing circuit for cells 11 through 16, rendering 6 cells inoperable. The cells still contained their missiles. The missiles were physically undamaged, as far as the damage assessment could determine in the immediate post-engagement period. They simply could not be fired from a firing circuit that no longer had electrical continuity through the fragment impact points. The secondary damage was to the Aft CIWS mount's power conditioning unit, a solid-state component in the mount's electrical supply chain that the fragment debris had struck and partially damaged, leaving the mount in a state where it could track targets in radar mode, but could not reliably fire its cannon. The mount's drive systems functioned. Its radar tracking functioned. Its fire control computer functioned. Its ability to translate those functional elements into actual rounds leaving the barrel was compromised by a power conditioning failure that the engineering team assessed as repairable, but not in the time available before the ship needed to be underway. The damage assessment was completed by 11:15 p.m. The operational picture at that point was specific. The ship had a forward VLS battery with 10 cells fully operational. Its forward SM2, ESSM, and SM6 inventory was intact. The aft VLS battery had 8 cells operational and 6 inoperable. The forward CIWS mount was fully functional. The aft CIWS mount could track, but could not reliably fire. The ship's radar systems, electronic warfare systems, and fire control processing were undamaged and fully operational. The ship's propulsion was undamaged. A destroyer with partial VLS loss and a degraded aft CIWS had a meaningful defensive capability reduction, most critically on the stern arc and the aft engagement sectors where the aft systems normally provided the primary coverage. The degradation was not catastrophic. It was significant. The commanding officer's operational requirement was to transit the destroyer out of the Persian Gulf, through the Hormuz approach corridor and into the Gulf of Oman, where a logistics rendezvous and engineering support vessel were waiting to conduct the repair work that restored the aft systems to full functionality. The transit distance from the ship's current position in the lower Gulf to the Hormuz approach was approximately 90 nautical miles. At 18 knots, the transit would take approximately 5 hours. The question was whether the IRGCN's intelligence picture, which the commanding officer had to assume included knowledge of the first engagement's outcome and the damage it had produced, would allow 5 hours to pass without attempting to exploit a damaged ship, while it was still in Iranian reach. The intelligence picture at 11:15 p.m. suggested it would not. The collection architecture had been registering elevated IRGCN coordination traffic since the first engagement's conclusion. The pattern was consistent with the activation cycle that preceded a follow-on strike. Not immediately, but within the operational planning horizon that the current indicators suggested. The commanding officer transmitted the situation report to 5th Fleet and received authorization to proceed with the transit at best sustainable speed. with a naval escort asset repositioning to meet him at the Hormuz entrance in approximately 3 hours and 30 minutes. A timeline that placed the rendezvous point still inside the Gulf, in the Straits approach corridor, where the geography began to tighten. The transit began at 11:34 p.m. The ship moved south and then southeast, the Persian Gulf's northern coastline visible on the radar picture as the familiar pattern of terrain returns that the crew had learned over the preceding weeks of operations. The CIC was manned at full combat watch. The forward CIWS was in automatic engagement mode. The aft CIWS was in tracking-only mode. The mount's radar would continue to build track data that would be fed to the forward mount and to the fire control system, but the aft mount itself would not fire. The coverage gap on the stern arc was real and was being managed by repositioning the forward mount's automatic engagement arc to provide partial overlap into the stern sector, accepting the reduced effectiveness of the forward mount against stern arc threats in exchange for some coverage where the aft mount was not available. At 1:22 a.m., 64 nautical miles into the transit, the radar picture changed. From the northeast, multiple contacts bearing 047 degrees, range 61 nautical miles. The contact classification came quickly. The flight profiles and altitude signatures were consistent with cruise missiles rather than loitering munitions. Faster, higher altitude transit phase, the sea skimming behavior appearing only in the terminal approach rather than throughout the flight profile. Iranian land attack, capable cruise missile variants, their approach bearing placing them on a direct track toward the destroyer's current position. 9 contacts. At the cruise missile's transit speed, the closure rate placed impact at the destroyer's current position in approximately 11 minutes and 40 seconds. 11 minutes and 40 seconds with a forward VLS battery of 10 cells, an aft battery of 8 fully operational cells, and a forward CIWS as the only gun system terminal defense. The aft CIWS tracking feed was operational and would be used for fire control data. But the actual engagement would have to be executed by the forward systems and the operational aft VLS cells, with the degraded stern arc coverage that those limitations imposed. The approach bearing of 047 degrees placed the threat on the ship's port bow, not from the stern, not from the most vulnerable arc that the aft CIWS loss had created. The forward systems had the geometry. This was the best available engagement scenario, given the ship's current configuration. It was not comfortable, but it was manageable in a way that a stern arc attack would not have been. The TAO called the outer ring engagement. 4 SM-2 interceptors from the forward VLS cells, 4 against 9 contacts accepted the reality that outer ring engagement against fast cruise missiles with the current inventory would leave a meaningful number of contacts for the inner layers. The SM-2 launches came at 1:23 a.m. and 8 seconds. The forward VLS cycling through 4 cells in a rapid sequence whose deck vibration the watch team felt with the specific familiarity of a crew that had already been through 1 engagement cycle in the preceding hours and knew the physical signature of their own ship's weapons firing. At 1:23 a.m. and 51 seconds, while the 4 SM-2 interceptors were still in their mid-course phase, the electronic warfare system registered a second launch signature, not from the northeast, where the 9 cruise missiles were already inbound. From the south, from a bearing that placed the origin in the waters south of the ship's current track. Waters that charted as open Gulf. No Iranian coastal territory at the range the emission signature suggested. No fixed installation that the intelligence database associated with missile battery positions. The EW classification took 3 seconds longer than normal, because the system was searching for a match that the database did not readily provide. What it eventually returned was a classification consistent with a mobile maritime launch platform, a vessel that had positioned itself in the open Gulf and was firing from a position that was not associated with any fixed coastal defense site. A ship, an Iranian vessel that had moved into the open Gulf during the transit period, positioned itself on the ship's southern bearing and was now firing from a position that the fixed coastal defense threat assessment had not accounted for, because the threat assessment had been built around fixed infrastructure. 4 contacts from the south, moving fast, sea skimming profile. The range from the emission source, approximately 18 nautical miles. At the contact's closure rate, approximately 6.5 minutes to the ship's current position. 2 simultaneous threat axes. 9 contacts from the northeast. 4 SM, 2 already in flight against the leading elements. 4 contacts from the south. Nothing yet allocated. The TAO's engagement allocation decision came in 4 seconds. 2 SM-6 from the aft operational VLS cells against the 2 leading southern contacts. The SM-6's active seeker preferred for the southern axis because the ship's current heading placed the southern contacts in an engagement arc, where the semi-active SM-2's guidance geometry was less optimal than the forward axis engagement. 2 SM-2 from the forward VLS against the southern trailing contacts, accepting the geometry inefficiency to conserve SM-6 inventory for contingency. 6 interceptors in the air simultaneously. 4 northeast, 2 south from SM-6, 2 south from SM-2. The VLS cells cycling at a rate that the engineering officer was monitoring against the cell temperature and sequencing data that governed the maximum sustainable firing rate. The cells were within parameters. The rate was sustainable. The inventory was decreasing. First S. M2. Northeast intercept confirmed at 43 nautical miles. Second northeast intercept at 40 nautical miles. Third, miss. The target's terminal evasion maneuver displaced it out of the intercept corridor at a range where the SM-2's semi-active guidance could not execute a sufficient correction. Fourth northeast SM-2 intercept confirmed at 37 nautical miles. 3 northeast contacts eliminated. 6 remaining. The fire control system was already building ESSM solutions for the surviving northeast contacts as the SM-6 engagement against the southern axis resolved. First SM-6 southern intercept confirmed at 14 nautical miles. Second SM-6 confirmed at 12 nautical miles. The 2 trailing SM-2s against the southern contacts, the geometry-compromised allocations, reached their targets at 11 and 9 nautical miles. Both connected. All 4 southern contacts eliminated. Southern axis clear. 6 northeast contacts remaining. Inside 20 nautical miles. 2 ESSM interceptors launched against the 2 leading northeast contacts at 17 nautical miles. First ESSM intercept at 15 nautical miles. Confirmed. Second ESSM intercept at 13 nautical miles. The contact's return showed the degraded signature, consistent with structural damage, rather than immediate destruction. The track continuing for 4 seconds before falling below the tracking floor. Probable elimination. 4 northeast contacts remaining, or 5 if the probable elimination had not achieved a kill. Inside 12 nautical miles. The ship was now in the engagement zone where the CIWS would need to be the terminal backstop, and the terminal backstop on the stern arc was the damaged aft mount that could track but not reliably fire. The northeast contact's approach bearing had shifted slightly as the engagement progressed. Their original bearing of 047 degrees had drifted to approximately 039 degrees, as the contact's individual approach profiles diverged slightly from the formation's original heading. Bearing 039 placed them on the ship's port bow to port beam arc, which was forward of the beam, within the forward CIWS mount's primary engagement zone, not in the stern arc dead zone that the aft mount loss had created. The geometry had remained favorable throughout the northeast engagement. The IRGCN's planning had put the cruise missiles on the ship's most capable engagement arc, what the Southern Mobile Launch Platform had been designed to do, and what the post-engagement analysis would identify as the second operation's intended purpose, was to force the ship to divide its forward VLS inventory against 2 simultaneous axes while both threat packages were still at ranges where the inventory was needed, reducing the reserves available for the inner ring engagement against whichever axis survived the outer ring work. The southern contacts had been eliminated cleanly. Their elimination had consumed 4 interceptors that were no longer available for the northeast axis. The northeast axis had 6 surviving contacts inside 12 nautical miles. 3 additional ESSM interceptors launched against the northeast survivors. 2 against the leading contacts, 1 against the third. First ESSM confirmed at 9 nautical miles. Second ESSM confirmed at 7 nautical miles. Third ESSM miss at 6 nautical miles. The same terminal evasion behavior that had caused the SM-2 miss in the outer ring. A bearing shift at close range that moved the target outside the detonation envelope. 3 northeast contacts remaining. 1 confirmed, 1 probable miss from the ESSM layer. Inside 6 nautical miles. The forward CIWS mount acquired all 3 contacts simultaneously and began its engagement sequence. First contact eliminated at 2.4 nautical miles. The burst pattern clean. The radar tracking solid on a contact in the forward arc, where the mount's geometry was optimal. Second contact at 1.8 nautical miles. Engaged. Radar return collapsed. Confirmed elimination. Third contact. The one that had twice defeated guided intercepts through terminal evasion. It was approaching on a bearing that had been drifting progressively aft of the beam throughout the inner ring engagement, now at approximately 0 to 2 degrees relative, between the port bow and the forward beam. Still within the forward CIWS mount's engagement arc, but at the edge of it, the tracking geometry requiring the mount to rotate to its limit of traverse to maintain acquisition. The mount tracked. The burst opened at 1.6 nautical miles. The contact executed its terminal maneuver. The same bearing shift at close range, dropping altitude simultaneously. The combination of bearing change and altitude change introducing a guidance discontinuity in the reposition that the fire control computer corrected in approximately 800 milliseconds. The second burst fired at 1.1 nautical miles. The contact was struck. Its radar return degraded. Not the clean collapse of an immediately destroyed airframe, but the progressive deterioration of a structurally compromised missile losing aerodynamic stability. The contact descended. Its approach trajectory flattened and then angled downward. The damaged airframe no longer capable of maintaining its sea-skimming altitude. It impacted the water at approximately 610 meters from the ship's port bow. The impact visible on the forward camera feed is a brief white column of spray rising from the dark surface and collapsing almost immediately. 610 meters from the port bow. The debris from the water impact, the missile's fuel and structural fragments, dispersed across the surface ahead of the ship's track. The bow wave pushing through the debris field approximately 14 seconds later without consequence. At 1:31 a.m. and 4 seconds, 8 minutes and 56 seconds from first contact detection, the radar picture was clear. The commanding officer ordered speed to 22 knots. The transit continued. In the south, the Iranian mobile launch vessel that had fired from open Gulf waters had already turned north and was running at maximum speed back toward Iranian territorial waters, its position tracked by the ship's surface radar until it crossed the 12 nautical mile line, and the tactical calculus of pursuit became politically irrelevant, regardless of what it offered militarily. The weapons inventory after 2 engagements was the number that the commanding officer transmitted to 5th Fleet along with the contact report. Forward VLS, 6 SM 2 cells expended, 2 SM 6 cells expended, 3 ESSM cells expended from the original ready inventory. Aft VLS, 2 SM 6 cells expended from the operational cells, 2 SM2 cells expended. Forward CIWS, approximately 3,100 rounds expended across both engagement sequences. Total remaining forward VLS, ready inventory, significantly reduced. Aft inventory, reduced. CIWS, adequate for 1 further engagement sequence at current consumption rates before a reload was required. The rendezvous with the escort asset, positioned at the Hormuz entrance corridor as promised, occurred at 3:08 a.m. The escort provided tactical coverage for the transit through the strait itself, its full combat systems providing the depth that the damaged destroyer's reduced configuration could not generate independently. The Hormuz passage was uneventful. The destroyer cleared the strait's southern exit at 4:22 a.m. and entered the Gulf of Oman, where the engineering support vessel was waiting, at coordinates that the logistics coordinator had transmitted 6 hours earlier. The repair assessment on arrival confirmed what the post-first engagement damage report had described. The aft VLS firing circuit was restaurable with replacement components that the support vessel carried. The aft CIWS power conditioning unit was replaceable in approximately 14 hours of engineering work. The structural hull damage from the first engagement's terminal fragment impacts was significant, but not operationally limiting. The penetrating impacts on the aft deck. Plating had been below the waterline impact threshold and presented no flooding risk. and temporary repairs could be completed within the engineering support period before the next operational assignment. 14 hours. After 14 hours, the ship would be restored to full combat capability. After 14 hours, it would be returned to the operational cycle that had produced 2 combat engagements in 1 deployment period. That had spent in those engagements an interceptor inventory measured in millions of dollars, and that had generated the kind of operational data that the fleet's doctrine and tactics community would be analyzing for months. After 14 hours, it would be available for the next assignment. The crew that had held 2 engagements, the first that had produced the damage, the second that had exploited the damaged ship's residual capability to its limit, was not in the repair period. They were doing what naval crews do in port, sleeping where they could, eating when the schedule permitted, standing the reduced watches that a ship alongside an engineering support vessel in a non-threat area required, and beginning the administrative processing of 2 after-action reports that would need to be submitted before the repair period ended. The administrative work could wait. The sleep could not. The next assignment would not wait for either. The Gulf of Oman was calm in the way that bodies of water are calm when they are simply water. Without context, without the tactical significance that the preceding 9 hours had imposed on every radar return and every bearing and every second of flight time. The ship rested alongside its support vessel. The water moved in its own patterns, indifferent to what had crossed it. The watch had been held. It would be held again. That was the only certainty the Gulf offered. Not safety, not resolution, not the end of the need to hold it. Just the fact that as long as people were willing to stand the watch, the line remained.